You bought the house, you pay the massive mortgage, but somehow a bored neighbor with a clipboard entirely owns your soul. Welcome to the insane world of homeowners associations. We tracked down the most ridiculous power-tripping HOA fines ever issued in America. From illegal flower colors to banned porch chairs, these suburban dictators have completely lost their minds. 1. $200. That is what it costs to play a little classic rock in your own New Mexico backyard on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. The local homeowners association officially slapped a resident with a fine for excessive recreational noise. Keep in mind, the volume was scientifically proven to be lower than a standard lawnmower. And yes, gas-guzzling, screaming mowers were perfectly acceptable under their rigid rules. So, a deafening two-stroke combustion engine gets a total free pass, but a tiny Bluetooth speaker playing the Eagles crosses the sacred suburban line. You really have to wonder if these committee members just absolutely despise human joy. 2. Living right near the beach usually means dragging half the coastline into your living room. To fix this, a homeowner in a North Carolina coastal town built a simple outdoor shower to rinse off the sand. Standard coastal living, right? Well, the neighborhood committee hit this poor guy with a harsh financial penalty for an unapproved plumbing fixture. Let this completely sink in for a second. These developers built an entire residential community just steps away from the actual ocean, and then acted deeply, personally offended when a resident installed a highly practical device designed specifically for people who visit that exact ocean. 3. Nothing screams wholesome Americana quite like a neighborhood movie night. Kids on blankets, fresh popcorn, and a family film projected right onto a closed garage door. Well, a Maryland HOA quickly stepped in to crush that suburban dream, issuing a hefty fine for the unauthorized use of an exterior surface for display purposes. They literally penalized their own residents for hanging out and building a sense of community. The crowd packed up, everyone went inside, and the street went back to being dead silent. The board claimed a massive victory, completely oblivious to how utterly miserable they looked to the rest of society. 4. A brutal crime wave recently hit an Arizona subdivision when a child drew a hopscotch board on a public sidewalk. Yes, some absolute menace used brightly colored chalk on concrete. The HOA swiftly issued a formal violation notice for this heinous act. They officially documented a harmless substance that magically disappears the very second it rains. Granted, waiting for a solid rainstorm in the middle of the desert could realistically take about 8 months. But that is beside the point. Some fully grown adult looked out their living room window, saw a kid happily playing outside, and somehow decided the only logical response was legal paperwork. 5. An Oregon man received a ridiculous financial penalty for the completely unthinkable crime of parking his personal car directly in front of his own house. He was not blocking a neighbor's driveway. His registration was totally fine. He was just safely parked. Here is the absolute kicker. That specific road is entirely city-maintained. The neighborhood association does not own it, they do not fund its repairs, and they hold absolutely zero legal authority over who parks there. But as we all know, power-tripping suburban committees and actual legal jurisdiction have always had a highly questionable, completely toxic relationship. 6. Down in Florida, a woman was hit with a severe violation for placing a bird bath in her front yard. The aggressive official charge was maintaining an unapproved decorative structure. Now, guess the massive size of this eyesore? 12 inches. A standard garden gnome would literally look down on this minuscule piece of concrete. Yet somehow, this incredibly small bowl of rainwater was suddenly classified as the single biggest threat to suburban real estate values in the entire zip code. You have to wonder if someone brought a magnifying glass to the board meeting just to declare a state of visual emergency. 7. A quarter of an inch. That microscopic distance was all it took to trigger a crushing $50 a day fine in one North Carolina neighborhood. We are talking about the exact width of a standard pencil tip. Try to visualize the sheer lunacy of this scene. A neighborhood representative actually drove out of their way, got down on their hands and knees with a plastic ruler, painstakingly measured a complete stranger's lawn, wrote up a formal violation, and then drove back home feeling like an absolute American hero. The scariest part of this entire scenario? That person is actively allowed to vote in local elections. 8. Children decorating small stones with ladybugs and smiley faces sounds absolutely adorable, unless you happen to live under the iron fist of a Texas HOA. After placing these brightly painted rocks in a quiet garden bed, the parents received a threatening notice for unauthorized decorative landscape modifications. We are talking about innocent art created by little kids, resting quietly in a pile of wood chips. Almost no one on the street would have ever noticed them. It took one highly specific person, armed with a clipboard and a severely empty daily schedule, to spot those smiling rocks and demand they be completely eradicated. 9. Placing a single pink flamingo in a flower bed seems like a completely harmless way to add a little vibrant flair to your landscaping. Honestly, that cheap plastic lawn ornament is so universally American it practically deserves a spot on our currency. But an Alabama association instantly classified it as illegal novelty decor and demanded its immediate removal. They actually forced a resident to take down a plastic flamingo in the Deep South. That is a region where quirky yard personality is basically considered a protected constitutional right. Banning a pink bird down there is a downright shameful betrayal of Southern culture. 10. Let us talk about a poor guy in Texas who got slapped with a $200 fine just for painting his own house the wrong shade of beige. Notice I did not say the wrong color. I specifically said the wrong shade. His neighborhood committee actually possessed a heavily guarded master list of 12 strictly approved beiges. Yes, 12 agonizing variations of the single most boring color on the visual spectrum. They managed to invent a massive crisis over a pigment whose entire fundamental job description is to simply never attract attention. And somehow, this specific beige failed spectacularly at being invisible. 11. A small straw scarecrow sitting quietly in a garden bed during the month of October resulted in an Alabama homeowner getting heavily fined. The ridiculous infraction? Displaying seasonal decor outside the strictly approved timeframe. Let that absolute nonsense sink in for a minute. It was a literal scarecrow. A decoration specifically invented for autumn, displayed perfectly in the middle of autumn, doing its one specific seasonal job during the exact right season. But apparently, the neighborhood committee decided they held the ultimate supreme authority to completely overrule the actual calendar. When an association starts arguing with the Earth's rotation, we are all doomed. 12. Choosing the wrong type of wood chips can evidently cost you dearly. A homeowner in Pennsylvania spent her entire weekend doing exhausting manual labor, buying 40 heavy bags of red mulch and painstakingly spreading it all over her flower beds. She stepped back to finally admire her beautiful landscaping work, only to open her mail and find a steep fine waiting. The neighborhood rules strictly required brown or natural tones only. She was financially penalized simply for picking a mulch color that the board members apparently found deeply emotionally distressing to look at. Imagine being that incredibly fragile over some red dirt. 13. Purple petunias growing happily in a Tennessee front yard earned a resident a swift and brutal penalty because only white, pink, or red flowers were on the officially approved master list. These absolute maniacs literally color-coded Mother Nature. A living organism naturally grew straight out of the dirt, bloomed under the bright sun, looked absolutely beautiful to any normal human being, and a stiff committee quickly decided it was exactly the wrong kind of beautiful. That poor purple flower never even stood a fighting chance against the ruthless, completely joyless bureaucracy of the modern American suburbs. 14. Hosting a simple weekend garage sale without jumping through hoops for a special neighborhood permit cost one Ohio family $200 in arbitrary fines. That brutal penalty was actually significantly more money than they even managed to earn at the sale itself. They were just trying to clear out some perfectly good used baby clothes and a dusty old kitchen blender. In the end, the HOA generated more pure cash profit from writing that single violation ticket than the hardworking family made from their entire day of dealing with bargain hunters. It is a perfectly engineered, self-sustaining little extortion economy. 15. A doormat reading the mildly sarcastic phrase, "welcome-ish," earned a South Carolina homeowner a quick $100 penalty for violently breaching the community's strict aesthetic standards. We are talking about a cheap piece of fabric. an object that exists completely and specifically for sweaty people to drag their dirty, muddy boots across before entering a house. Someone sitting on that powerful committee actually looked down at a woven floor accessory, read a harmless joke, and somehow took it as a deeply personal attack on their grand architectural vision for the neighborhood. If a humorous piece of fiber threatens you, seek professional help immediately. 16. An inflatable kiddie pool sitting quietly inside a privately fenced backyard caused an absolute massive uproar in Maryland. This was an $11 plastic tub from a local drugstore, yet the association fiercely fined the homeowner for erecting an unapproved temporary recreational structure. It held barely 30 gallons of tap water and exactly one incredibly happy toddler. And yet, a fully grown adult sitting in a serious committee meeting actively evaluated the situation, gathered the board, and formally voted to legally classify a cheap plastic circle as unauthorized architecture. The sheer level of delusion required here is honestly worthy of scientific study. 17. One extremely petty association sent out a formal legal violation notice simply because a resident's cat was reportedly sitting in a front window entirely too frequently. They officially labeled the poor feline as an unattended visual nuisance. It was literally just a cat, sitting peacefully in a sunny window, doing the exact same lazy thing that every single indoor cat on the planet does for 10 hours a day. The board essentially attempted to regulate the daily habits of an animal species that entirely refuses to acknowledge basic human authority on its absolute best day. Good luck serving that legal notice to Fluffy. 18. A family in Ohio found themselves facing ridiculous financial penalties just because the roof of their backyard doghouse was exactly 6 inches taller than the neighborhood guidelines permitted. 6 tiny inches. On a wooden box built specifically for a golden retriever. This structure sat completely out of sight in a fenced backyard, constructed solely for an animal whose main weekend hobby is chewing on old tennis shoes. The family dog never officially received a copy of the typed violation letter, which is honestly a massive shame because the dog would have handled the appeal process with significantly more grace than the board. 19. Hanging a standard "Beware of Dog" sign on a wooden fence in Indiana triggered an immediate steep fine for displaying unapproved signage that heavily implies a dangerous animal. The deeply ironic part is that the extremely dangerous animal in question was just a goofy golden retriever named Biscuit. We are talking about 60 pounds of uncontrollable tail wagging and highly aggressive face licking. The committee read that terrifying warning sign and immediately pictured a bloodthirsty wolf patrolling the perimeter. If Biscuit ever somehow got loose, he would have probably happily licked the entire board of directors to absolute death. 20. Placing one single decorative boulder in a Utah front yard led to a ridiculous fine for illegally installing an unapproved hardscape element. Let me just repeat that absolute insanity. A single rock. In a state that is literally famous worldwide for being completely surrounded by massive, majestic mountains made entirely out of rock. The association somehow managed to find a way to have a serious legal problem with basic geology itself. Honestly, at the rate these people are going, it is only a matter of time before they start finding the actual tectonic plates underneath the neighborhood for shifting around without a permit. 21. Drying your freshly washed clothes on a backyard clothesline seems like a fantastic way to save energy, right? Not in South Carolina, where a homeowner was slapped with a harsh fine for officially creating visual clutter. It was just cotton sheets drying peacefully in the afternoon sun. You know, the exact same way every single human being on Earth dried their laundry for all of recorded history before the electric dryer was finally invented. The local committee took one single look at an eco-friendly tradition that is significantly older than electricity itself and boldly declared that it was absolutely not up to code. 22. Installing solar panels on your roof in Nevada should be massively celebrated, considering it is literally one of the absolute sunniest states in all of America. Instead, a local association fiercely fined a homeowner for executing an unaesthetic rooftop modification. They literally stared up at a brilliant modern device that silently converts free, unlimited sunlight into free, usable electricity, and forcefully ordered a grown man to rip it all down. It really makes you question their basic logic. Apparently, the people running that neighborhood just truly enjoy writing massive monthly checks to the local power company and demand everyone else suffer too. 23. Sometimes these neighborhood dictators do not even care about your yard. They only care about the private inside of your house. A Tennessee HOA fined a homeowner solely because the interior of his garage was deemed not aesthetically organized while the door happened to be casually open. They quite literally walked past his private property, peered inside the open garage, silently judged a grown man's personal tool storage system, and then mailed him an official penalty letter. That is not enforcing a community standard, my friends. That is just being aggressively nosy with a monthly budget and far too much free time. 24. Maintaining a single managed beehive inside a fully fenced Oregon backyard seems like a fantastic way to help pollinate a quiet home garden. Well, the local board completely disagreed, instantly fining the resident for actively operating an unauthorized insect habitat. This guy was actively trying to help out the fragile local ecosystem and keep nature thriving. The committee, on the other hand, was fiercely defending the sacred right of a suburban backyard to contain absolutely nothing interesting, helpful, or even vaguely alive. Heaven forbid a few tiny bees try to make some delicious honey without submitting their architectural approval forms in triplicate. 25. A standard satellite dish roughly the exact size of a dinner plate got an Oklahoma resident aggressively fined for constructing an obtrusive rooftop installation. The absolutely hilarious thing here is that federal law strictly protects the right of any citizen to install small satellite dishes on their own property. The association either had absolutely no idea that this powerful federal law existed, or they simply did not care because they felt incredibly superior to the United States government. Honestly, both of those options are completely on brand for a rogue neighborhood organization that heavily thrives on pure, unadulterated selective ignorance. 26. Turning on your festive Christmas lights on November 28th seems perfectly normal, unless your neighborhood officially demands you firmly wait until November 30th. Those 2 measly days of premature holiday spirit resulted in a swift and uncompromising violation notice for one completely unlucky family. Showing just a little bit too much festive joy slightly ahead of schedule actually cost them real, hard-earned cash out of their own pockets. Whoever confidently said the Grinch lived entirely alone on a snowy mountain was dead wrong. He clearly lives right down the street in a beige subdivision, armed with community guidelines. 27. Parking a Ford F-150 in a private driveway got a retired Florida teacher a massive fine because the board aggressively labeled it a commercial vehicle. This is the best-selling truck in America. It is essentially the state bird of Florida. By officially declaring it an illegal industrial eyesore, this rogue committee basically ruled that half the country is actively violating their precious neighborhood code. They didn't just fine a teacher, they declared a deeply confusing war on the entire American automotive industry. 28. A massive front yard oak tree exceeded a strict 15-foot height limit, prompting the local board to aggressively demand it be chopped down or significantly trimmed. The wild part? That specific tree was easily 20 years old and had been peacefully growing on that exact spot long before the subdivision was even planned out. A magnificent living thing that predated the actual neighborhood association by 2 full decades was suddenly ordered to magically shrink or be violently destroyed. The tree certainly did not sign their restrictive covenant agreement, and frankly, it was standing there way before those complaining board members arrived. 29. Having too many normal cars parked on a public street during a standard suburban Minnesota birthday party led to a ridiculous penalty for excessive guest traffic. How many vehicles exactly caused this massive neighborhood crisis? Exactly 8 cars. 8 friends showed up to celebrate a birthday, and the association immediately swooped in to punish the host. The neighborhood board literally put a strict, legally binding cap on exactly how many friends you are officially allowed to invite over to your own house. That is not a community rule. That is just a deeply lonely person's terrible revenge against anyone with actual friends. 30. Mounting a classic rooster-shaped weather vane on your rooftop is a beautiful piece of traditional American design that is literally older than the country itself. Yet an Iowa association took one look and instantly fined the homeowner for an unauthorized rooftop ornament. They actually penalize someone for installing a completely silent, wind-powered metal bird that simply tells you which way the breeze is actively blowing. Honestly, it is incredibly fitting that the board hated it so much because, based on their absolutely ridiculous decisions, those committee members have clearly never known which way the wind blows on anything. 31. Leaving basic Amazon packages sitting on your own front porch for exactly 4 hours triggered a harsh violation in one Texas subdivision for maintaining unsightly exterior storage. These harmless brown cardboard boxes were casually delivered in the middle of the afternoon while the homeowner was miles away working at their actual job. The neighborhood association essentially invented a brand new suburban crime based entirely on modern shipping logistics and a regular person's tragic inability to instantly teleport home from the office. Apparently, if you cannot magically intercept a delivery driver while sitting at your cubicle, you clearly deserve financial ruin. 32. Hosting house guests can be a little stressful, but it gets significantly worse when a Nevada HOA aggressively fines you simply because your own mother stayed for more than 14 days. Yes, her actual biological mother was sleeping peacefully in the spare guest room, and the local committee completely lost their minds. The board essentially put a strict legal timer on wholesome family visits and immediately sent a heavy invoice the second that invisible timer naturally expired. Just imagine having to sit down and awkwardly explain to your sweet mother that the Neighborhood Aesthetic Committee has incredibly strong opinions about her vacation. 33. A Maryland homeowner decided to brilliantly spice things up by installing a highly unique mailbox shaped exactly like a massive largemouth bass. The local association was absolutely horrified and immediately demanded it be forcefully replaced with a standard, utterly boring black rectangle. Was the giant plastic fish incredibly ugly? Probably. Was it simultaneously the absolute most interesting object on that entire sleepy street by a massive factor of 1,000? Without a single doubt. But naturally, the neighborhood board violently rejected the aquatic art piece and chose strict conformity, because exhibiting even a tiny ounce of personal originality is practically a felony. 34. Allowing a small patch of your front lawn to grow naturally into a beautiful meadow just to help local pollinators survive sounds incredibly noble and helpful. But a homeowner in Oregon was brutally fined for harboring an illegally unmaintained lawn area. She was literally trying to help essential honeybees survive a global environmental crisis, while the board was aggressively defending the fading honor of aggressively short green grass. Only one of those two specific things actually matters for the long-term survival of our local ecosystem, and the neighborhood association enthusiastically chose to side with the completely useless grass clippings. 35. Keeping 3 little chickens secured safely behind a tall wooden fence in Alabama sounds like a fun, entirely quiet hobby. There was not even a loud rooster involved, just 3 peaceful hens quietly producing maybe a single egg a day each. Still, the local association dramatically classified the tiny coop as a massive, unauthorized livestock operation. 3 little birds scratching in the dirt barely even qualifies as a weekend hobby. But the governing board reacted exactly like this guy was secretly running a massive industrial poultry processing facility and illegally supplying chicken nuggets to half the local fast food restaurants. 36. A thin layer of regular road dust completely covering the hood of a car after a long afternoon drive earned a North Carolina homeowner a shocking violation for failing to meet strict vehicle appearance standards. The vehicle was not abandoned. It was not violently propped up on rusty cinder blocks, and it was not leaking dark oil everywhere. It was just a little dusty from being actively driven on public roads, which is literally the exact functional thing cars were originally invented to do. That ridiculous committee would probably fine the actual rain clouds for leaving water spots if they could. 37. A 70-pound Labrador retriever that was incredibly friendly, perfectly trained, and officially certified as a working therapy dog caused absolute panic in a Kansas neighborhood. The strict association aggressively fined the owner for daring to naturally exceed their incredibly firm 50-pound pet weight limit. Let us look at the real facts here. The big, friendly dog had flawlessly passed a rigorous psychological and behavioral exam. The neighborhood board members absolutely had not. One of them was incredibly calm, deeply patient, and always reasonable under intense pressure, and every single person listening knows exactly which one it definitely was not. 38. Placing 3 cheerful garden gnomes in a Pennsylvania front yard triggered a severe HOA violation for blatantly exhibiting excessive decorative items. We are not talking about 30 chaotic statues violently cluttering up the lawn, just 3 little ceramic guys quietly standing in the mulch and bothering absolutely no one. However, the neighborhood's strict legal limit was exactly 2. So the frustrated homeowner had to make a heartbreaking choice and literally decide which specific gnome was getting permanently banished. Somewhere out there in a dark, freezing landfill right now, a tiny bearded man with a pointy red hat is staring endlessly into the void. 39. You know those little pencil marks on a doorframe where parents measure their kids growing up? A Texas family did exactly that on the inside of their wooden fence gate. The HOA boldly labeled it the malicious defacement of an approved architectural structure. These were tiny pencil scratches, facing entirely inward, legally recording a happy childhood. The absolute only way anyone could even witness this horrific vandalism was to physically open a private gate, trespass, and snoop, which some nosy committee member clearly did with zero shame. 40. Singing quietly to yourself in your own private backyard on a sunny weekend afternoon should be totally fine for anyone. But a homeowner in Georgia had a petty noise complaint instantly weaponized into a financial penalty because her soft singing was deemed audibly intrusive to adjacent properties. She was not blasting heavy metal or performing a loud stadium rock concert, she was literally just happily humming while pulling weeds in her garden. The association genuinely fined an adult woman simply for making a pleasant sound with her own mouth while standing on the grass that she actually pays a mortgage for. 41. Growing fresh, highly nutritious tomatoes in a sunny Colorado front yard earned one adventurous woman a swift and aggressive fine for maintaining an unsightly property. Meanwhile, the very next-door neighbor had a lawn full of hideous, half-dead crabgrass, and absolutely nobody on the committee cared. So, the association's official stance on nature was incredibly clear to everyone. Useless grass that is actively dying and turning completely brown? Totally fine. Delicious food that is actively growing and happily feeding a local family? Absolutely unacceptable. You really have to admire their priorities because at least they are completely consistent at being insane. 42. Hanging the American flag on your own private front porch while actually living inside America seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Well, a Nevada woman was aggressively fined because the strict neighborhood rules required prior written approval and a commercially certified flagpole for absolutely all flag displays. The stars and stripes literally required a signed permission slip from a local committee just to legally exist outside a house. It is exactly the kind of bureaucratic nightmare that makes you heavily question reality. Honestly, somewhere out there, a majestic bald eagle just quietly shed a tear and immediately retained a civil rights attorney. 43. Installing a basic security camera pointed directly at your own front door seems like highly standard home protection these days. But a Texas association quickly flagged a resident's new camera as a massive neighborhood surveillance concern. The lens was strictly facing his own personal property and literally nothing else. But the deeply paranoid board firmly stated that the small black plastic device was making the neighbors feel very uncomfortable. Think about that totally twisted logic. The innocent guy actively trying to protect his family was somehow treated as the massive problem, rather than the actual neighborhood criminals who might rob him. 44. Leaving a standard green garden hose curled up casually on the lawn right after finishing your afternoon watering earned a Texas resident a ridiculous fine for improperly stored equipment. The absolute ultimate irony here is that he was actively watering his green yard, which was an action the neighborhood association strictly required him to do under massive threat of penalty. So, the essential physical tool he desperately needed to perfectly follow one of their strict rules instantly became a severe violation of a completely different rule. It is just the beautiful bureaucratic system flawlessly working exactly as it was intended. 45. A deeply dedicated husband in Texas urgently built a wooden wheelchair ramp for his wife right after she unfortunately had major surgery. He did not wait for formal approval, so he easily caught an immediate fine. The The cold board flatly told him he was strictly required to submit a detailed architectural review form and simply wait 6 to 8 entire weeks for a decision. His recovering wife desperately needed that ramp to physically get inside her own home right now. The local committee simply needed to feel incredibly important right now. Guess exactly which critical situation that ruthless board boldly decided to prioritize. 46. Running playfully on the common area, grass seems like totally normal human behavior until an Arizona association aggressively steps in to ruin it. We are not talking about a hyperactive dog tearing up the turf, but a human being simply going for a light afternoon jog. The committee explicitly told a resident she was allowed to walk, but definitely not run, because jogging actively creates excessive wear on landscaped surfaces. Normal walking was perfectly fine. Aggressive power walking was somehow also completely fine. But the absolute second both of her feet left the ground. Massive violation. Moving fast was the literal crime. 47. Choosing the totally wrong color for your patio umbrella can apparently heavily ruin an entire neighborhood's precious vibe. A homeowner in Arizona happily set up a dark green umbrella on her back patio, only to discover the community guidelines strictly mandated beige or tan. Think about this massive absurdity for a second. We are talking about the color green, displayed entirely outside, in a sprawling backyard literally filled to the brim with green plants. The association board officially went on record to firmly declare that the color green was highly inappropriate for an outdoor environment. Just let that really sink in. 48. A Connecticut homeowner hung a 6-inch green wreath on their front door and got slapped with a formal financial penalty. Why exactly? Because absolutely all hanging exterior items required pre-submitted written board approval, regardless of the season. We are talking about a tiny circle of dead leaves and a cheap red ribbon. It is objectively the least offensive object ever created by human hands. Yet somehow, this power-hungry committee treated a simple door decoration like it was a glowing radioactive hazard threatening the entire block. 49. Leaving your empty trash cans out on the public curb exactly 14 minutes past the neighborhood's strict retrieval window triggered a harsh financial penalty in New Jersey. 14 measly minutes. The municipal garbage truck was actually running very late that afternoon, completely delaying the entire neighborhood pickup process. But the ruthless committee simply did not care at all and heavily fined the homeowner anyway. Aggressively punishing innocent people for random logistical situations entirely outside of their personal control is not just an unfortunate side effect of suburban neighborhood culture. It is quite literally the entire foundation their power-tripping operation is built upon. 50. A retired military veteran was suddenly hit with a steep and insulting fine simply for placing a small, simple wooden bench in his front yard, where he quietly sat every single morning to drink his coffee. The local association aggressively labeled his peaceful morning spot as highly illegal, unapproved outdoor furniture. Let that reality check completely sink in. This brave man literally shipped out overseas, fought hard for his country, managed to somehow come back in one piece, sat down in his own front yard to enjoy a nice sunrise, and quickly discovered that a suburban committee was his actual final boss. I want to know who is actually worse: the power-tripping HOA presidents writing these unhinged fines, or the pathetic neighbors who quietly snitch on everyone. Name and shame the absolute worst neighborhood rule you've ever dealt with in the comments right now. Make sure you hit subscribe and like the video before your local committee makes watching YouTube a code violation.